Step in my dojo, you
Step in my dojo, you
step in my
Hey.
Yo, what up? Hey.
Hello. Welcome.
At Producer Dojo, we have a constant stream of live events waiting for you to come get your learn on. Sign up at the link below to make sure you don't miss out.
Yo, what is up, ninjas? It's Tesko here. I hope you're having a great time at the summit. I'm super stoked because today I'm going to be diving deeper into some basic dojo concepts and showing you how you can take them one step further and apply them in the bigger picture. It's going to be a bit more of a fast-paced presentation, so if you need to revisit this after you brush up on the basics, I would definitely recommend you do that. Alright, so today we're going to be touching on this concept that I call arrangement hierarchy, which is basically just a combination of the far away rack concepts and the mix hierarchy applied to the course of your arrangement. Here are the 3 weekly downloads you're going to want to make sure you have a good understanding of before applying these ideas. So, one of the most common problems I'm seeing producers falling into is not being able to articulate their tracks throughout their arrangement how they want to. So sections that are supposed to pop won't, and vice versa. So if we can find out what characteristics the more intense sections have that the less intense sections don't, then we're on the right track to being able to diagnose these problems and fix them. Alright, so to recap the mix hierarchy, it is essentially the correlation between how important an element is to the song and where it is placed in the mix. The more important, the more present, and vice versa. This includes volume, but also these far away rack concepts, which we're going to get into. So now to recap the far away rack, it is the combination of filtering and reverb, along with one more thing we're going to get into in a sec, that allows us to unlock that third dimension of our mix cube and get that full sound that you're looking for. You're going to hear me using these terms a lot, so to be clear, when I say presence, I'm talking about where a sound feels in the field of depth. The field of depth being forward, backward aspect of your mix cube. You can also think of the fact that in the real world, stuff with more mass power to it is going to produce lower frequencies than something with less mass and power to it. Compare a whale to a mouse or an elephant or a cat, right? This one's pretty straightforward. The closer I am, the less reverb. Further I am, more reverb. Now, one thing I want to turn your attention to is being careful when you're choosing reverb sizes and decay times. You're going to find a small room reverb that is more wet is going to sound more upfront than a long tail reverb that is less wet. Now lastly, I want to talk about dynamic range. This is why over-compressed sounds tend to get sucked back into the mix. If you think of an example like ASMR or somebody whispering a secret, they have the full dynamic range available to them. They could whisper, they could yell, they could talk, they could scream, they could shout. But if they're far away, they have to be yelling to get your attention. So effectively, the lowest part of the dynamic range gets reduced. The quietest sound you are able to hear needs to get louder the further away you are. So if you want that fullness that you're looking for, you're going to want to make sure that you have loud. That you're looking for, you're going to want to make sure that you have loud and quiet elements for contrast. So when you start thinking about this idea of arrangement hierarchy, it gets you thinking about where do all of my sections lie on a scale of intro to drop. Oftentimes people are making mistakes in these less intense sections of their song, which prevents them from building up to that climactic point in their drop or chorus. For example, a really common thing I'll see is towards the end of the build-up, the high end of the risers will exceed the high end of the first downbeat of the drop, and because high end is correlated to excitement and intensity, the drop feels less intense as a result. Now, one really useful thing I'd suggest is to start with getting the drop sounding as full as possible and working your way backwards. This way, no matter what kind of track you're working on, you can always ensure that the drop remains the most climactic point of the song. This way, we can also use sections like the intro, the build, the breakdown, the outro, whatever, to give us a different insight on this main drop idea and to move our ideas forward. So think of your song as a story, and your elements in your music being the characters in the story. Are they a main character? Are they a secondary character? Are they a background character? And if they're a main character, what kind of insight are you giving me into who that character is? So, Spider-Man would not be an engaging movie if it's just Spider-Man at the peak of Spider-Man doing Spider-Man things, kicking bad guy butt all the way through. No, the movie starts with Peter Parker. We see him evolve into Spider-Man, realize his powers, the first downfall, the rise again, right? The happy ending. It's all of these different aspects of this character that give us more insight into who they are and help us get attached to it. So how do we replicate something similar in our music? Well, we can correlate these attributes of depth to this hero's journey kind of development and treat our arrangement as a movie. All right, so I want to talk about a few common problems that I see producers falling into. I'm not saying never do these, by the way. I'm just saying be aware of these things, and if you're breaking these rules, do it from a place of intention. So first thing I commonly see is people just introducing new elements in their intros, breakdowns, builds, whatever, just to fill space and make it more interesting. Don't do this. Use this as an opportunity to show me some character development with whatever that main character is in your song. Introducing a new unrelated character is like showing me Superman while I'm watching Spider-Man, or showing me Leonidas from 300. Those characters serve no purpose to getting across the character that is Peter Parker or Spider-Man. So if you have the idea that is Spider-Man, show me the Peter Parker version of that idea. Next, you're going to have a really hard time building up to the drop if you're using the same sub from the drop in other sections of your song. Make sure that your sub is coordinated with the arrangement and the movement of the other elements, and take advantage of things like sub drops, reverses, glides to coordinate your sub with what's going on and make it feel like it's...
I feel so great. It's the best decision I made to really take my music skills to the next level. I just feel so much confidence now in the process, and just kind of, writing without having inspiration. Like, when else in my life I thought that would be possible. And now I can sit down and have like 3-4 ideas, 4 drops, because I learned drops paid the bills.
Yes.
And I had like 4 awesome drops done in a day, and that's just mind-blowing.
And make it feel like it's supporting the statement above. And also keep in mind how it's going to affect people on the dance floor. Where are they going to feel this in their body? And if you do any sudden stops, know that it's going to take a lot of the power out of the dance floor. And lastly, I want to talk about not mixing your ambiences and textures and background effects too loud. To me, this is the equivalent of we're shooting a scene in New York City, main character is very clearly in frame, and then a background character just walks between them and the camera, or they pop next to them and they're like, "Hi, Mom," or something like that. The character is there literally to just serve as another body in New York City. We don't really care about their story, and they should never get in the way of the main character. So commonly I find people are limiting the amount of dynamic range they're using, and everything is mixed within 20 dB of the loudest and quietest element. Now you got to keep in mind, the heavier compression you're doing in the mastering stage, the more it's bringing the hierarchy closer together. So I like to think of it as existing on a elastic that's been stretched out, and when I do my final master, the elastic gets brought in. And if you don't give a little bit of extra contrast between everything, when you bring everything closer, you run the risk of muddying up your hierarchy and not being able to communicate to the listener clearly who's the main character, who's the secondary, who's the background. All right, so a rough arrangement hierarchy might look something like this. Don't get so caught up in the characteristics that I've listed here. They're just a couple of examples of things you could look at. The main idea is if you find yourself hitting roadblocks and your song's not popping like you want it to, that drop just isn't wide enough for you, compare it with the rest of the sections in your song. Figure out which sections are more important than others, and make sure that if you want that really wide drop, your build up is less wide than that, and your verse or your outro are less wide than that, and so on. All right, so to wrap it all up, I want to leave you with this quote I referenced last time, which is very near and dear to me. It's the difference in volume that make a mix sound loud. If everything is loud, nothing is loud. Said by ill.gates himself. I really like this because it encourages you to create contrast. And not only does it apply for leveling, it also applies for stereo width, excitement, power, so on. And I hope that I've showed you how to take these basic dojo concepts and apply them to the bigger scale to solve a lot of these common issues and pitfalls producers fall into.